We have an excellent advisory group, just like Sriram's lab, global leaders. And we have labs mainly in India. We were about to expand US when the pandemic hit. That's been postponed a bit. Yes.
Gautam, apparently we are offline there. Can you just wait? We are not online to the world. So in the chat, they said, please wait. Hopefully someone will let us know when to restart.
Yeah, I can hear Gautam, I can hear you, but maybe other people are not able to hear us. That's probably what's happening.
Yeah. You are all
no, your voice is also echoing. So Gautam's voice.
No, I think they have a problem with the outside world.
Yeah.
Yes,
that is also
a problem with the streaming. We'll just give you a confirmation when it's on.
Yeah, please.
I think if the issue is of bandwidth, then probably we can switch off the video, then continue with the audio. That might help in, hearing the voice clearly.
Sir, that is video streaming, sir. This is within the Zoom only. So we are on the platform, and that is this feed from here. Feed from here is going to web. So that's why
I think this is about streaming to the world. That's
So I think we'll be live in another 10 seconds, sir.
Yeah, just let us know.
Yeah.
Gautam, you can probably start from the beginning.
Should I start from the beginning? I don't know if you can see the screen.
We are not seeing your screen now. Yeah, we are live now. So Gautam, please start. I invite Gautam Shroff, head of TCS Research, as the next presenter. Over to you, Gautam.
All right. So I'll basically try to share some of our experiences in TCS on taking things from lab to market. I have to share my slides a bit. Oops, there we go. Let's try again. Okay. All right. I think you can see them now. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So should I switch off my video or?
No, we can't see it yet.
You can't see the charts?
No screen.
Hello? It just went away, came back.
Yeah, we can hear you, Gautam, but we can't see your screen. Maybe try sharing your screen again.
All right, let's try again.
Yeah, now it's coming. Starting to come.
So research is old in TCS, started in 81. We have a number of research areas, minute advisory board, and our focus is to go for real world impact through our business. And the derived publications that come out of that are reasonable in number for a lab our size. We're fairly large, about 200 PhDs and 600 total researchers across 7 locations in India. I'll share our from lab to research. So this is an organizational process. It's not a research process. It operates at the company level and is essentially reported to our business groups and the CEO twice a year. So exploration happens in research. Business units have to monetize, and obviously there's the TRL levels in between, which everybody's probably familiar with, technology readiness levels. So it's all about capabilities that we develop, meeting the opportunities in the market. Unfortunately, this doesn't always happen when we want it to. So often we have capabilities and the opportunities come much, much later. For example, we invested in material science, primarily working for our other group companies in the 80s and life sciences in 2000s. But the broader opportunities for the wider adoption across our Fortune 1000 customers only happened in this past decade. So formulation design using physics-based and AI-based models, and genomics as a platform being adopted by our pharma customers is now happening in some sense. It happened a few years back. So it takes time. You need for long-term investment for any market opportunity to actually see today. The other thing, another example is robotics. We started more than a decade ago, and only a couple of years back, this has now become something which is being adopted by our large logistics customers as a way to automate their last mile deliveries. The opportunities can come first. This probably needs to pick up, and that's normally because of an intent at the strategic level, and you develop the capabilities. For example, in the 80s, migration was a big thing. So we started off by doing material science research, but we started compiler technology and software research, and then developed everything which led ultimately to the Y2K migration tools and everything else in between. We decided to develop in the banking space in the 90s and evolved a model-driven development, code generation capability in research to support that, which has now become very much a part of that product group, and it's a large business group. And finally, this, bringing the capabilities and opportunities to that doesn't always happen. There's a big divide between what's happening in the real business, getting customers, executing projects, selling products, and research is developing. You need somebody to make that. So there's a need for a function. We have established function called evangelization, and there are people dedicated to make it happen, both but it's important capability, and it's a very different skill. That's one thing. And the second thing is, when you do have the handshake, you have to start productizing. And the skills for productizing are obviously very different for research, engineering, and also the business side, the product vision, the roadmap, also the scale. So you improve the scale in the middle so that it becomes a product which is big enough for the company to support from a managerial perspective. So some things are very good. They have a few customers, but they cannot support it from because they're just too small in their scope. So they sort of get thrown out the door in some sense or become part of something larger. Another is collisions matter. I think Vijay mentioned it. I think Shira mentioned it also. For example, material sciences and life sciences plus AI is what is actually making a lot of difference. Its example is a lot of people have done this, developing drug targets and drug opportunities for COVID. Nothing has really worked. So, but the work is at it, and some of these publications are by our researchers and many others from all over the world, and it's being tried out in various labs like CS labs, etc. Similarly, developed, which was used to develop workflow systems for many years, and we built IT systems for 40 years using these kind of tools, automatically generating code from specifications. Interestingly, that's AI with, in specific reinforcement learning in multi setting actually becomes very interesting mix because model build workflows and build simulators, and simulators which are very accurate, things like large supply chains and complex operations of large organizations. And those simulators can be used to train a multi-agent reinforcement learning systems and resulting in what we now have a major initiative on the enterprise digital twin. We have got this going in supply chain for retail customers, for travel, for media, for communications, all kinds of settings, and behavioral modeling of people, modeling of complex systems, and generating simulations is all a part of this. And by the way, this is data poor in the sense that it requires science. Data comes in, you get data, you have to do your simulations and your models. But this can be done without huge amounts of data, especially for greenfield things, when you're setting up new things. Lastly, specific to AI, in the, bridging the expectation and skepticism gap to market, and this particular conference is an example out of this current feeling that AI will solve everything. It's a nice to have thing. It brings funding and focus to a lot of research, but also it builds up expectations which are possibly way beyond what AI can do and what technology can do. People businesses build things that you and I can use every day. This overemphasis on AI might be just all hype. It is somewhere in the middle. This is the art of the possible. I'll give you just stories. One, we started about 5 years ago. We were building social networks in IT, and the idea of having conversational systems. And IT people say this is just not possible. You just can't have natural language processing. Well, guess what? We built it and deployed it. Now it's not deployed to all 450,000 people. It's been live for a couple of years. For all kinds of industries, HR, insurance, etc., answered using conversational systems. Nobody believed it was possible. Second thing is, if you talk to a MSME sector, people, you can say, oh, well, all these fancy things you're doing for large companies, what can you do for small organization? I think that's important for this discussion. Well, can you do anything? Is it cost effective to robots in small industries? No. Is it possible to use vision APIs to do inspection for quality in small industries? Possibly. Is it effective? Can it be put into production? Can a small entrepreneur use? These are questions I think we need to answer. And last point on AI, it's not. I think this is a research question, and only recently we have seen some papers in this area. It's not enough to have accurate AI models. It's also they have to be confident of their predictions and also underconfident when they actually are underconfident. So this is something which is only recently people have started looking at this carefully. Otherwise, AI can't get deployed unless you know with what confidence the systems are doing things. So I'll end there, and I will take the rest of the questions in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Gautam, for presenting your views. I next invite Dr. B.K. Murthy of MIT to present his views on this topic. Dr. Murthy.
I'll share my screen. Good afternoon to all. I will be talking mostly about the government funding for this research, AI and research. Traditionally, government funding from S&T labs and departments had been mostly for extramural research by the academia and R&D labs. So to bridge the gap, subsequently, the academia and industry, various efforts of transfer of technology have been initiated, and then rules have been formed. So the main reason for that is the benefits of R&D should go towards the common people, and finally how to improve the quality of life by this research. So target towards commercializing and starting towards from the basic research. So deployment aiming at for large cross sections for use of covering significant portion of the country. So, but in this TOT model, we found that around 5 to 10% only lead to the transfer of technology, and many of the projects of the cutting edge technologies also stop at the POC level. So the technology relevance levels, if you are taking right from the proof of concept or basic research to that is ideation to commercialization, there are at least 10 levels are there. In a traditional technology, be any other branch of engineering and technology, the levels will be ranging from 1 to 10. These are all sequential more in nature. So the funding deployment model earlier, the government funding mostly proposals from TRL level 1 to 5 because it is mostly supporting the academia and the research labs. So it is 1 to 5. Individual PhD students, as PJN mentioned in the beginning, are project modes, support for equipment, research staff, and etc. and other extramural works. The consortium model also has been initiated, collaboration with R&D labs for getting it from just basic research and publications to coming out a POC where different technologies, different research results of the people can be used to come to a product level. Successful projects would reach at most 7 to 8 maximum, but not large scale deployments. So the deployment models earlier we were using directly by the institution itself, by TOT, or the transfer of technology to another company through using some of the agency like some of the R&D labs, or implementation by the line ministry, or creation of the startups. So what are the impediments by this? Deployment model takes longer time, sometimes even months or even years together. So ROI is very negligible. Without market studies and field trials, deployment by line ministries are also not very keen for these things. So identifying industry partner in the initial stages itself is becoming a bit problem, because industry doesn't want to take that risk most of the cases. So industry investments are also very minimal. So not much government funding for the industry or startups were there. No funding for graduation of startups from A to B. Initial startup company from the incubation level to the next level graduation funding is also not there. So AI, especially AI and emerging technologies we are taking, the total life cycle should be very short because of its potential nature of the technology itself. Deployment has to be very faster. So industry startups and line ministries should get access to the technology very fast. The moment it is coming out of the lab itself, the industry should tap that low hanging fruits and then deploy. So big players should be roped in for national rollouts. So sourcing model would help to stakeholders write reactions at various TRLs levels. So some of the TRS level, you need to do extra work by the industry also, or for the other labs who are doing this. So recent setting up of COE, Center of Excellences by MIT, could bring in some of the academia and startups and industry together. We have recently, during the last couple of years, we have set up nearly 100 Center of Excellences in various emerging technologies. This could be one of the better model, but the model could be improved further also. I will be giving some suggestions. DST's technology innovation hubs under the cyber physical systems project. Also, it is another model towards combining the industry, academia, and the startups and other hubs also into this. So AI research industry funding attempts and some suggestions from my side. Industry funding should focus on fully deployment of the lab to research solutions and additional work engaged with the academia or R&D labs. So instead of directly funding to the startups, provide work orders deployment or deployment for that amount. So that means if a startup company has been given some funding from the government side, instead of just leaving that funding to that startup company and then just leave them alone free, what we should do is we should also engage some of the line ministry or the user organization, tie up with him, and then provide a work order. With that work order from the government departments, he can go and then find out work orders from other companies and other people around. So that means we are opening the market for them as well as funding them also. So the recent startup challenge of MIT is one of the example in that direction, and should also to be backed up by the R&D labs and academia, because the startups have the technological horizon for the startup company is very small. So you need to enhance this technological horizon as well as giving the funding to the startup company. In order to nurture them, we need to have some backup by the R&D lab or academia for the technology enhancements also. So, and there was earlier some proposal, and also I suggest the same thing, earmark about 5 to 10% of the government procurement fund for experimenting in the solutions, new solutions from the startup market or the new technology areas where there is no exactly precedence was not there or pre-deployment models were not existing. For such solutions, at least on a trial basis, just a minimal amount of funding also could be earmarked by the departments. So the proposed mechanism, government should facilitate a platform for the collaboration of industry, academia, and startups, just like the Center of Excellence model of MIT. Conceptualization, discussion in the focus areas, inviting industry to participate right from the beginning, define the goals, specifications, and active participation by the initial stages itself. And academia should focus on the research. That is the core of the academia. Industry for deployment and product and marketing. We can even set up some designated labs or identify the existing labs for translational research purpose. Their job is to get the work from the research results from the academia and then convert into field deployable prototypes. So, and not only for the Indian problems, but also to compete globally. Then only the market share will be good. Mr. Shoroff has mentioned that it takes enormous amount of time and also energy and money for converting a translational research into a commercializable product. So for that, in order to reach the market, we need to compete globally also. Then to bridge the gap with translational houses, accelerators for startup companies also and incubation can be roped in. So basic research and R&D to address local problems for Indian solutions to begin with, but it should be globally competitive. So provide work orders, monetize for certain number of devices rather than direct funding from the government to the startups. So line ministries like Northeastern earmarking some funds, we can have the earmarking 5% or maybe less of the government procurement for budget for deployment of AI solutions. That is another important thing. So in summary, basic research and POCs at the academia level and pilots in the consortium mode, along with R&D labs or translational houses, and designated translational labs and R&D for the prototypes, pilots, and field trials, and taking up to the market, and implementation or deployment by the industry. We should focus on this. Monetize some of the startups through the work orders, or maybe monetizing some amount of devices if they are procuring if you are in the manufacturing of hardware devices. So some of these things we should focus on. That is my suggestion from my side. Maybe in the next discussions, I will interact more. Thank you for giving this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Murthy, for presenting your views. The last panelist is Professor Narendra Ahuja, who is currently in the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He's there and it's about 4 a.m. for him. So instead of joining live, he has sent us a video. I request the people to play his video. Over to Professor Ahuja.
Reach to the user. So let me get to this. AI is for automated or assistive problem solving, and it's increasingly used now for a variety of problems across the globe by industry, by governments, and while industry always goes after things that help it with, making commercial impact and money, the governments are increasingly also doing the same. They're using the AI. Mostly because AI is also equally relevant to solve problems that are traditionally associated with taking care of large populations or problems of day-to-day concern to masses. So in that sense, AI is quite relevant to India's needs, problems, whether they are administrative, economical, civic, whatever their nature. The idea is to bring together the activities of the different parts of the government, different ministries, through joint projects. The projects which are joint between technology development and needs of the ministries, problems that the ministries have to solve, so that the technology's prowess can be applied to solving problems and coming up with solutions that are richer, better than what we are used to. Now, in the process, of course, we hope that there'll be a big boost to the performance of the domain ministries. And that is not to say that it will be coming at the cost of any performance intrinsically that we are familiar with, that the ministries have. Rather, it would enhance, it will be a win-win on both sides. Both the IT side as well as, or AI side and IT side, as well as domain ministry, both will benefit. Now, currently, this thing is quite difficult to achieve because domain ministries require more advanced AI expertise than they have. And that's actually normal because you can't expect the ministries to have both domain knowledge and the computing information processing knowledge. And because that's the case, the solution lies in collaboration between the ministries, as I said. And this actually is becoming a new normal. And it's actually becoming normal for success. The governments are getting behind or getting ahead based upon how much AI they can use. And since the governments are concerned with large-scale problems, any improvement, any progress made is of large impact, large magnitude. So in a way, this is becoming a passport to leaping ahead. Now, to achieve this kind of a joint project type of mode of functioning requires a shift in the levels of recognition that the government has, the ministries have, the people in the ministries have. Recognition for the fact that it's a win-win for all ministries. It's not a zero-sum game. Everybody can go ahead. On the one hand, it's the recognition that is needed. Second, the recognition has to be converted into reality of joint projects on the ground. And that requires enthusiasm and effort to devise mechanisms that will overcome the current procedural barriers that are there to joint projects. It's clear that there are difficulties, and it's also clear that a lot of people recognize it. But what we need is a combination of adequate recognition and effort level so that the barriers that do exist for historical reasons are overcome. Okay, and I don't need to really go through the various domains, various domain ministries that would benefit from it. That is kind of obvious. So let me just go straight to the nature of the ecosystem that I'm talking about. Again, that is somewhat obvious that we want, just like in the government, we want academic institutions, departments to also come together unified by a problem as opposed to unified by their departmental or the institutional identity. So we want institutions to improve their quality and quantity of R&D in AI, in this case, by working together and working with similar colleagues across the world, including the people who are, good anywhere. So no boundaries. Seek renowned scientists, etc., as mentors and translators, and form linkages everywhere, institutions, departments, countries. The ecosystem that of this kind will be measured in its performance. Are things being done differently or not? By, of course, the R&D quality measures, the familiar traditional measure, but in addition, how much impact it makes on the quality of curriculum. Those are many times treated as two different streams. But in order to keep the curricular stream healthy and alive, R&D has to be closely looped with it. So the ecosystem of this kind that we're talking about, which would enhance the quality of research and taking lab ideas to market, that would also require a tight loop between R&D advancement and curricular advancement. Now, the third thing that this ecosystem would require for the market thing to succeed is immense sensitivity or better sensitivity of the researchers to the needs of the society. And that is a very deep topic. But first thing we can do is to be very keenly aware of this fact that what you are is not different from what you do. So societal sensitivity among researchers is very critical in my judgment to succeed in taking AI research to market. And of course, having good quality research so that the solutions are good. And finally, all of these three things should be combined in formal mechanisms to promote the entrepreneurship, working with industry, etc., to make this happen, namely successful deployment. Now, what are the challenges in this? Challenges in ecosystem building in the Indian context, of course, the very large number of institutions which are used to doing things in a certain way. The variability of quality, the width of the spectrum, quality spectrum, is tremendous. It may not be uniform, but it has a broad range. And the tremendous lack of teamwork, the team spirit, that is a challenge. I mean, these are challenges that we must accept, and they're natural. They have arisen because of some reasons. So we don't have to be associated, we don't have to feel good or bad about it. We just say these are the facts, and we have to recognize that they need to be addressed to make progress. So large scale variability of quality that is there, the lack of working, the spirit to work together to address problems, and finally, the drive that is observed among researchers on a day-to-day basis. R&D people, how can they be producing more? How can they be more passionate about producing more in real-life problem solving? So with that, I want to bring this to a close. Again, I'm glad this is happening. I'm glad that we are brainstorming at this scale. And AI is relevant. We can take it forward. We can take the country forward. And I look forward to more activity in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ahuja. For those of you who don't know, Professor Ahuja, apart from being a professor in Illinois, he spent the last 6-7 years leading a coordinated research funding effort under the MIT, it's called ITRA, the IT Research Academy. They conducted several socially relevant projects by combining academic teams and teams of other types of people. So he has a lot of experience in this. So now that brings us to the end of the presentation. Now we have time for discussions among us, as well as questions from the on the chat that may come from outside. So let me start with a question to Gautam. Gautam, the idea that industry should work with academia, or industry should take these technologies forward to make them real solution for the community. This is somehow shared by many people. And as TCS Research has a long history of working with academic institutions on collaborative problems. What are your conclusions or suggestions based on your direct experience on this?
I think we work with academia quite a bit, as you have already mentioned. We work in some sense, two modes. One is where we are investing in collaborative research in an area which is sort of related to what we are interested in, but the best results, best people are not with us, which is often the case. I mean, we obviously don't have all the best people in the world, and many people in academia are far superior. So we invest in their research, and we take the fruits of that research and incorporate it into our downstream activities at the TRL 4-5 level where it makes sense. The second way we engage with academia is in terms of enhancing talent. And there I think we need to go a little way. And we can actually bring people on board as advisors already, and many people already on board as advisors. But we've been suggesting to academia, IIT directors, yourselves as well, that we need to have a mechanism for quote unquote joint appointments, which is robust, fulfills the employment criteria of income tax, etc., but also is attractive to faculty and industry. I think we have a model, and we think we'd like to make that much more operational. So that brings talent in some sense 50-50 between academia and industry. Some reduced teaching load, some more time being spent with industry. And I think the last point is in this to make this connection happen, the tragedy which has struck us in terms of the pandemic, in some sense, has also brought up an opportunity. In 4 weeks, the 450,000 people were working from home and pretty productive. Tapered patterns have been coming at a steady stream and no loss in productivity. And we're better able to talk to our academic partners. We are able to have internships which are totally virtual. It's actually working. We're onboarding people without ever having them seen in office. We're surprising ourselves that it actually works. So it brings opportunities for collaboration, which we had never dreamt were possible. So perhaps this is the time to take that opportunity and bring it together.
Okay, thank you. The steps involved that I outlined in my original presentation, or the starting presentation, of going from a lab prototype to the final, it's something that's directly usable, is long, and that's where everybody is suggesting team up with industry or industry-like entities. I'm just made to understand that there was a technical problem in between before we proceed any further, and the statement by Sriram from Microsoft was not broadcast. So we will request him to make his statement again. The technical team also confirmed. So please, Sriram, please go ahead and present that. We'll come back to discussions later.
Yeah, so sorry about that. Mine was not, and I'll try to be brief now. Can you see both my slides and my video? Is it possible? Can you see right now my slides?
Yes.
Yeah, and I will try to be brief this time, right?
We can, but I think the people outside have to confirm. I think.
Yeah.
Could see you, but people outside could not.
Could not see. Okay, then maybe I should just repeat, right? So essentially, right, I want to give some context, of where I am from, so that you can put my views on, what it takes to take technology from the lab into a real world deployment in context, right? So I am part of Microsoft Research India. We are a lab established in 2005. We are about 15 years old, and we have about 70 colleagues, right? About 40 PhDs, and we work together with engineers, program managers, etc. And this is something that PJN mentioned as is extremely essential, to connect research to actual deployments. And these are the 4 areas in which we work in: algorithms, ML and AI, systems and technology for socioeconomic development. And we measure ourselves by the 3 vectors of impact. Impact we create to science. In that sense, actually, we are very similar to academia. We in fact actually work very closely with academia. We even teach courses together with academic colleagues. We publish in top conferences and so on. But I guess perhaps what is more important to this conversation is translation of research to actual deployments and getting research out of the lab. And as a company, I think we have a significant opportunity, which is to actually learn, from the product groups about the hard problems that they have. And I think that is actually a unique inspiration that a lab like ours have, because we can actually talk to people, be it search or be it gaming, be it operating system, be it, many of the database problems, any of the problems, actually, we can really talk to people and understand what are the real hard technical problems that people are facing. And actually, it helps us actually frame our problems. And when we publish our research, right, our research actually has significant influence throughout the industry. I mean, product groups from Microsoft have picked up our work, for example, and I think the validation that we get from the academic community is actually an important part of that process as well. But perhaps actually what is even more important for this panel is that we also work with the community. I mean, since the beginning of the lab, we've always worked on technologies for social examples like Digital Green and 99 Dots, and more recently we're working on something called HAMS for automated driver testing. All of these are now collaborations with the community, be it NGOs, be it funding agents, and so on, to bring the technology from the lab into real-world deployments. And some of these, like Digital Green, is an independent NGO right now. 99 Dots is now an independent company called Everwell. So we could talk about that, those experiences in the panel. So this is sort of my, confessions of a PhD. From the perspective of, bringing the ivory tower work to the real world. The number one thing, is you get no points for reinventing the wheel. It's extremely important as a scientist to be aware of the state of the art and push the frontiers of knowledge. If somebody has already done something, might as well just adopt it. And true breakthroughs don't come from incremental work and actually just even working on one area, but actually it comes at the gap between research areas, right? I mean, Gautam mentioned material science and computer science. And we have seen actually a lot of interaction between computer science and social science, machine learning and programming languages. That's where the breakthroughs come from. And if you want to change the world, right, you have to flip your view. It is not about you or your ideas, right? It has to start from the problem, the users, the aspirations, and what they're trying to do. And people care about themselves and their problems, and not about you or your ideas. And I think I always talk about the 3 levels of gradation. As a scientist, it's always hard to actually come up with an idea and write a paper. It's an order of magnitude harder to build a system that works and solves a real problem. And it's much harder than that. Even one more order of magnitude harder to build a system that sustains itself economically, either commercially in a company or through an NGO with the government. It doesn't matter, right? Building something that provides enough economic value to sustain itself is an extremely hard thing. And to answer PJN's question on how you do this, I think there's no shortcuts. I mean, you have to deploy, iterate, be humble, listen, fail, and re-examine your assumptions and repivot and change and iterate. That's really the only way to actually build things that actually work and graduate from the lab. And I think, as PJN was saying, it is not enough to just have researchers. You need engineers, program managers, HCI experts, and all kinds of people to actually really, business people to really, you need that kind of thinking to do scale deployment, and partnerships are key. And, and here are some examples of things that, I've personally had experience in, or actually I've had my colleagues in sort of graduating from research in the lab, and perhaps actually we can use that during the discussion. So thanks for your patience. I have to speak 2 times. Apologies to my panelists for having to listen to this twice, but hopefully the people outside got to listen to it at least once. So I'll stop with that. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Sriram, and sorry for the initial hiccup. The technology is beyond our control. Now we'll just continue from what you just said, Sriram, and I think it will be illuminating to the listeners if you can briefly tell the story of either 99 Dots or Everwell, and how it, what does it do, and where does it start in the lab, and where is it now, and what happened in between. I think it's a good example of the entire pipeline. Can you please?
Right. Yeah. So thank you, PJN. Right. I mean, it's a very interesting question. It was. See, this was a research project that was started by Bill Thies and Andrew Cross. And those of you who don't know, I mean, 99 Dots is a project which was about technology adherence for tuberculosis, medication. I mean, TB is a treatable disease, but you have to take medication for 6 months. And since it's a long duration, right, it's important that there is adherence technologies that health workers can ensure that people actually do take the medication the entire time. And what Bill and Andrew designed was a really low-cost technology by which pill packs are printed with a paper envelope in which every time you dispense a medication from the pill pack, it exposes a number to which actually you can give a free call. And a computer picks up on the other end and notifies that a call has come. And by a combination of numbers, and each participant, each patient, can have a collection of numbers from which they call, and other techniques, we can detect that someone has made the call. And if somebody doesn't make the call, we know that they are at the risk of not taking medication. And that's where actually the human effort from the healthcare workers is now deployed to make sure that we bring them back on medication. It's very interesting, really simple idea. I guess it's sort of a very cheap way of doing IoT, right? Sensing and actually bringing back, and then creating dashboards so that we know who's not taking medication and who's potentially not taking medication. Right. So I think this project ran as a research project in our lab for many years. I think it ran for 3 or 4 years. And at some point, the researchers did more and more credible deployments. The initial deployments were done from the lab. And at some point, I think what happened was government got very interested in it. And also funding philanthropic organizations like the Gates Foundation, USAID, the Stop TB Initiative. I mean, they heard about this work and they wanted to actually deploy this at scale. And so a question for us is actually, how are we going to do that? One of the constraints you have as a company is that you cannot accept funds from these external entities, be it government. We are not set up actually to receive funds from everybody else. So we decided to actually set this up as an independent company. So we spun this off from our lab. Andrew actually left our lab and he became the CEO of Everwell. And by the time we also had Nakul Gupta, who's another colleague who joined us. So Andrew and Nakul both left and they started Everwell. And Everwell was actually independently funded. It was funded. We provided some support. And we also, of course, licensed all the technology that was developed inside Microsoft Research, to Everwell. And since then, Everwell kept growing. I think they now have about 50 employees. They are located in Bangalore, and Andrew is still the CEO. They've hired many, many people. And I think they now operate in around 17 countries, not just in India. They have treated more than 200,000 patients through the system. The other interesting thing that has happened, PJN, is that even though it started out in 99 dots, right? What Everwell discovered was that there was significant opportunity in just all sorts of digital technology around patient management, right? So the government, actually the healthcare department, they found more uses for these technologies than just 99 dots. So I was actually talking with Bill and Andrew recently, and they said, the government said to them, whoa, this is so cool, but why don't you actually build a patient management system for us, but not only for 99 dots, but all other sorts of TB medication adherence, right? Why don't you help us build technology so that we can do digital direct benefits transfer to these patients, right? So there is these, so even though adherence is the one problem they started with, right? Technology has many, many uses. So, that's sort of the scaling story. And I think what it also illustrates is that, in the growth of any of these things, it is extremely important to be flexible. And even though you start with one thing, people might see other values and you should be flexible and help them in other ways, because the final point is not to show that 99 dots works or not. That's important. But the more important thing is actually, are you helping people eradicate TB? That is the most important thing. So that's sort of, the experience, I would say.
Thank you. Thanks, Sriram. And I see all elements there, the academic research done in the lab and the different steps, so the lab themselves developing further, getting funding from agencies like Bill Gates, Gates Foundation. And then, of course, the most important thing, adoption by the users, especially government, because in all these social sectors, government is the biggest player and most trusted player. And unless they come on board, it's very hard to do anything. So, Dr. Murthy, you mentioned a architecture or a design where you said academia continues to do academics and you want separate labs which will do this translation, if I understand you right. Now, that sounds good, but usually the people with the most commitment to the technology are also people who develop it or who are involved with it. There is personal passion. So if you separate this translation team from the development team, how will that work? How do you see that as a problem or a strength?
Yeah, probably while presenting my slides, because of the shortage of time, maybe I did not explain in detail. So now that you have asked, let me explain in detail. Take, for example, any of the grand challenge. Say, for example, in the smart cities and the bigger cities, traffic is a bigger problem. Road accidents are a bigger problem. Suppose if you say that the grand challenge is reduce the traffic accidents by 30% within the next couple of years. So while for doing this, there is a technology component, there is a social engineering component, there is an implementation component, deployment component also. Like video analytics, setting up of the cameras everywhere and the roads, and then IoT devices on the traffic lights, and then finding out the traffic shaping. So identify the technical problems individually, and the basic research required for that, let it be done by an academia completely. And then you, along with the same thing, you have a consortium of academia and the research labs like maybe CDAC or any other labs that you are talking about, maybe Digital India Corporation itself, or another NGOs and other, some of the implementation people who are there and industry people. So all of them put together, address that problem, and then chalk out a complete program whose role is where. And then identify the problem right from the beginning to the implementation at the last stage also, along with the market research and also the impact study analysis right from the beginning itself. Now you identify the players Okay, like any of the marathon race or any of the where you are having different hurdles and then baton will be carrying from one place to other place to other place. Like that, the moment you start the basic academic research in that problem itself, and the other people who are working for the market research and other thing, they will be prepared themselves and how to carry on this research. So when you are completing one leg of the race and the other person is ready to take up that, and he will be already done some homework for doing that work. And from there on, you can take it and take it forward until the finish line is reached. So everybody will be on board right from the beginning, and you have a consortium of people who are doing it. Like you are doing any civil construction also, you will identify right from the beginning who will be the mason, who will be doing the electrical work, who will be doing other interiors right from the beginning itself. Combine all these people right from the beginning and then identify the players in each of the board and then work towards that. Maybe the role of a industry person, of a deployment person will come maybe 1 year later, but identify right from the now, so that you can identify the whole ecosystem right from the beginning, and you are ready to address the problem as and when your turn comes. So that's what my suggestion of creating a complete ecosystem. People are talking about ecosystem, but the ecosystem, trying out the each parties right from the beginning, that is what is required in future.
Thank you. I have a follow-up comment to that, but after that, I just want to say that this doesn't have to be me against all the panelists. If the panelists have questions for other panelists, please think about them, and we can ask each other or other comments on anything that happened. So, just as a follow-up to what you said, Dr. Murthy, I mean, we have evaluated our own, in our own effort what is the effort required to say develop a technology in the lab,
yes,
versus what is required to translate it to what we call a technology that can be transferred. Now, this is still not a product. This is still far from being a product that can be taken to the sold to the society or given to society.
Right.
And our estimate is that the man hours required to do the translation is at least equal, probably double the man hours required to develop it in the lab itself.
Yes.
Okay. Now, man hours, I want to call it by man hours because the cost of the translation is much higher than the cost of development. Partly because in research universities, we only count the incremental cost of research. We only count the stipend PhD students, which is very small compared to the entire expertise they have built. Whereas you count the manpower of the man month of the research, the engineers, we count their salaries, and that salary have to be near industry salaries, otherwise they will not come. Good people will not come. So when you are designing these systems, I mean the setup, please bear it in mind that the cost involved in this translation is significantly higher. I'm sure Gautam and TCS and Microsoft has also experiences which is either similar or probably their costs are even higher. I don't know.
Agreed.
So I just want to tell you that this is the reality. It is not that you can say that technology was developed with 50 lakhs. Now why are you asking for 22 crores? That is not. I mean that may not, the proportion may be like that. For this kind of expenses, because the kind of people involved, kind of effort involved. You have any comments on that? Otherwise, I'll ask Gautam or Sriram to present something to ask.
Just 2 points I wanted to mention in that. See, it is very difficult, and when you start the basic research, what will be the impact of that research in the society? I do agree that as a researcher, yes, it is very difficult. But midway the research ideas, if you are if you are getting some research results towards the finding out the final result, at that point itself, you identify who will be the person who is deploying it. That is very much possible. But today what is happening is, once you complete and then up to the POC level, then you are going to the market and then identifying for who will be the partners for this. See, instead of that, you do it in the midway itself when you are reaching towards POC itself. So that is my first point for that. That means you are reducing the cycle time of the total lab to land. That's one point. Second thing is, yes, cost, it is understood that for the pilot project, if it is some X amount, at least 4 to 5 times of money will be required for the translation. This is worldwide, it is accepted trend, and we have to learn that this is the amount that is required. If I have funded for one project which is there, say for example for X amount, so then there will be up to, if I want to take it to the market level, it will take at least 4x times. So if you can take that ballpark figure, maybe 4x or maybe n times more. So that n times more, a priori you have to fix it, and then you can work towards that.
Thank you.
I think that nobody is denying that the field trials will take enormous amount of time. Packaging requires time, and then ruggedizing requires more time. These are all everybody's acceptable terms across the world.
Thank you. I'm glad to see that realization. Gautam or Sriram, do you have any questions to other panelists, or Dr. Murthy, you have any questions to other panelists?
I had just one comment. See, in a commercial organization, managing the entire portfolio of innovation is much easier to a certain extent. It's not easy, but it's still easier because not only there is an inflow in terms of outflow in terms of cost of what you want to do now, but there's also an inflow from what things you did 5 years ago, and that inflow is obviously must on a portfolio level be much more than the outflow right now. So as long as you've got that story right, monetary measurements are easy to do, and justification of the entire funnel are easy to make. And every large company, and Microsoft, I'm sure, also has that. But in the social space, the the rupee value of eliminating illiteracy, or say, eliminating TB, is not there. So, but there is now in the global investment world, there is the concept of social impact capital. The ability to put actually a price on an outcome, and at a per capita gross level, and say, look, this is what we're willing to spend next 10 years to, say, eliminate some ill. Then you can work backwards and you say, okay, how am I going to spend that? And then agree to spend it, even if, don't worry if somebody ends up using much less of the money to do much more of the outcome. Let them create, let them take the gain, because that's how you'll get impact investing and impact entrepreneurship to actually come.
Sriram, any?
Yeah, I completely agree with Gautam there, right? I think it's extremely important that to solve societal scale problems, the outcome of solving them is measured, and investment is done to produce those outcomes, right? I mean, I think they have to be the outcome of investment. Much like commercially, when you invest something, you're looking for a return on investment in terms of percentage dollars, right? I mean, this has to be social outcome and social capital. And there are many people like Omidyar. There are so many people who are actually doing that right now. Governments are doing that. Gates Foundation does that. So I think that's very important. The other comment I want to make, PJN, is that the question that you talk about cost, right, of engineering, right? If you take a lab like ours, right, we have the resources to hire a certain number of people. We have chosen to hire a mixture of scientists, engineers. So if you take that cost as 100%, right, we can decide to apportion that cost with various. So a provocative question that I have, for academia, is that you have a certain amount of investment too. You can apportion that investment into certain number of professors, certain number of engineers. If you sort of think about it integrally as part of what you do, rather than think about engineering as a bolt-on expense for every project. So that's actually a provocative thought I might give you. If that is so serious actually for academia, then actually you have to treat them together. You have to have maybe professors of practice in addition to professors of science. You have to create a culture in which they work together, measure them differently. That may be a more deeper conversation, possibly.
Thanks for asking that question, Sriram, because this is exactly what we have been struggling with at IIIT Hyderabad. Fortunately, IIIT Hyderabad has a model where, what you said is nearly true. We have a budget of X, and how do we want to spend it is nearly up to us. as opposed to, if a government institution, they can only have so many professor positions, and there are probably very little like professor of practice kind of positions there. I mean, it has to be sanctioned by the government. There is difficulty there. We do have the flexibility, yet it's so hard to convince ourselves or the institution at large that we need to invest a certain amount of money in things that are not directly academic or seen as directly academic. If the choice is between hiring another PhD student or hiring an engineer, or hiring 2 PhD students versus an engineer to get something done. Now this question is, and in some sense in academia, these questions also get asked in a distributed manner or a decentralized manner. Each group or each individual faculty member may have a different answer to the same question. And I do see that faculty members in IIIT and elsewhere who have gone for the impact, research that is not just academic impact, but impact in the product or technology of society, have indeed chosen the investment, sufficient investment in the translational people who translate. We are in the process of establishing, like I explained in my presentation, we set up what we call a product labs. We hired a right person to head it. After that, he was given a little budget to hire whoever they want and do the translational work. So it's a small development team working within the institution. So we are trying to see how to institutionalize it or have a central team. And my recommendation to other academic institutions will be, this has to be a central team because, if you have a designer, there may not be enough for every group or every particular department in a university to have that kind of level of investment in people. It's primarily people investment as we see it, because at least in our areas, it's primarily people, not a less of equipment and so on. Now, the new component, which maybe I want to ask Gautam, is about data. I mean, in AI is all about data. Now, that's a different kind of investment. When we do research in, say, institutions, IIIT or IIT or any place, you primarily use publicly available data. You probably produce a little bit of data using some budget that you have. But when you take this product to the field, you need to test on all kinds of data, like Professor Vijay Raghavan said. The medical, pharmaceutical trials have to happen in different types of population. It hasn't been tested on Indian population. It's been tested on African population, etc. So that you need a different kind of data. So how can industry or how can this solution to market handle this aspect? And creating data also is another expensive proposition and time-consuming proposition.
I'll answer your question, but I want to make a comment on the previous discussion. Okay. See, I mentioned evangelization, and I think in the STIP policy also I gave this comment about evangelization that, DST, DBT, they fund a lot of research, but line ministries do mega projects and then look around for companies who have cookie cutter technology, which often doesn't have what is required in terms of cutting edge. But those large mega project leaders are very busy people. They're largely unaware of the research which is happening and being funded by the same government in DBT and DST. So the function of evangelization of the research happening with the ministries and the mega projects that the ministries are going to be investment and bring that back to the researchers that this is going to be happening over the next 3 or 4 years. Why don't you gear up for it in terms of proposing the right kind of projects? It's a function. And today this happens by committee. It should happen by a coordinated function. A function of people whose job it is to do evangelization. And I see a lot of young people in PSA's office, in DST, etc. And they're writing reports. But instead of writing reports, they should be talking to people, organizing connections, and communicating information from the consumers to the users of innovation. So that's one comment. On the data point, I think this is a challenge is faced by everybody. There are companies which generate data. For example, I'm sure Bing has a lot of data, Microsoft and all the e-commerce have data. Some people make them public, but there is a competitive aspect here, and it is a cutthroat industry in terms of the data So making certain amount of data public for academic purposes is useful, and a lot of people are doing that. But making data which is not anonymized, which has product IDs mentioned, and all that, those are things which suddenly then become at the boundaries of competition, right? So that's why we don't have them. And in terms of data on this population versus that population, I don't have a real easy answer to that, except that one has to collect the data. For example, for autonomous vehicles, I mean, we actually have a project which is collecting data. People are driving cars around, right? So, of course, that's helping a lot of our global customers when they want to move their systems into our country. So they need data. So one is proactively collecting such data. So one has to invest. Right?
So PJ, may I add something, PJ, on this topic, right? I think I think there's a tremendous opportunity. I think following on what Gautam is saying, for the government, I think to think about collecting data to solve problems of national interest as a national cause. Just like there is we sort of think about, the MNREGA program, where, certain things need to be done for the country. And, we have a social program where we pay people in the country to do physical labor. We need actually in this country for NLP to work, we need annotated data in many, many local languages, right? And, we could imagine a digital version of the MNREGA program where we pay, the people in our country to do the digital work and get the data, because it's a social program as well. And then the data is used for projects of national importance, right? So I think that's another thing that I think that government can actually think quite seriously.
Yes, nice suggestion. Dr. Murthy, I hope you are listening to these.
Yes.
Dr. Rajendra.
Yes, we are actually going in this similar direction in most of the cases.
Also, the comment by suggestion by Gautam on coordinating activities of the line ministries. I mean, I know if getting two departments to talk to each other in a university is hard, getting two ministries to talk to each other in the government is very, very hard. But I think he made a very good point that you employ companies, ministries, line ministry will employ companies who are completely unaware of the research being done and funded by the same government and another arm of the same government. Yes. Now, I don't know how to do that, but you should. I hope there is some mechanism being worked out.
The national program on AI addresses these issues, and then coordinated manner, the MIT will do it with other line ministries as well, so and along with the guidelines of NITI Aayog.
There is a question from audience that I would like to take it up. One Harish Ritesh. It's a very generic question. How do you create an economically sustainable business plan for a social startup? Both Sriram and Gautam mentioned, the measuring the outcome differently, etc. So what is but on the other hand, if you have a startup, you need to feed yourself, you need to feed your employees. So how do you do this together? Any comments, Sriram and Gautam? First Sriram, maybe then Gautam.
Sriram with the Gates Foundation might be better able to.
Yeah. I mean, I can give my views. Actually, the real person to ask this question may be Andrew Cross, but I can just may say a few things based on my conversation with him and Bill, right? I think the way these foundations work is that they have certain goals, right? They have earmarked certain amount of money to eradicate TB. And that is so if that money is spent actually consistent with those goals. So if you have a social cause that identifies with a cause that a philanthropic organization has already made, in some cases you may have to actually lobby to them and even convince them to actually earmark funds to that. Then you can get started using that, right? But what I've learned from Andrew is that will help you only to get ramped up. It's seldom that philanthropic organizations will continue to pay you over the years, right? I think my understanding, the way the social startups have to work is that once you get your initial investment, you have to actually get somebody to pay for the ongoing cost, right? I know that, for example, the way Everwell works is that once the technology works, right, the government actually pays for it because, they are serving the government and the government actually pays for it, right? And the sustenance actually has to be done. There has to be economic value. That's the only thing that can actually sustain. Right? Finally, somebody has to be cured more and somebody has to care about the citizens being cured and the government has to pay for it, right? Or a philanthropy organization. Only then, there's value can be created only if somebody pays for it, And as a startup, you have to identify that. You have to figure that out. Yeah.
Gautam.
It not only pay, somebody has to execute. Government can pay perhaps, but execution has to be done by a dedicated set of people. And if you already started that up, then it's fine. But I'll give you a couple of examples. Adult literacy program was done in the late 90s. I think you know a little bit about it also. And it hit a lot. It impacted a lot of people. But then beyond a point, you can't be doing that at the level of a country of India. So you couldn't scale it, and a lot of effort was done by Mr. Kohli, etc., to publicize, etc. But scale didn't happen to the extent we want. Still, this was not too bad. M-Krishi, another example, 1 million farmers, and then scaling. Go to everyone, PMO, Ministry of Agriculture again. Somebody has to take it up and scale it and create that thing. So it's a tough job. Paying is one thing, but everybody in the government says, look, find somebody who will execute it, we'll probably fund it. But execution, creating that organization the way Sriram talked about 99 dots, I think that's the challenge. You have to make that happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is ultimately any enterprise has to be self-sustaining due to its direct customers, and that's where the challenge is. The Gates Foundation can help in reaching there. Or that kind of support can help reaching there, but ultimately it has to be there. So we are coming to the end of our allotted time. I just would like each of you to make a 1-minute statement, on closing statement. Maybe start with Dr. Murthy.
So I wish that the AI national program AI that our ministry is along with the guidance of NITI Aayog, so will take shape, and we'll be happy that the results of the AI will benefit the common man. And especially from my side, from an individual, from the personal point of view, I'm happy to see that my career started with AI in 1986 when the KBCS program was launched jointly with our department and the UNDP in those days, signed in November 1986, and I was active participant in that, active employee of this department. And now almost I'm in the fag end of my career. Another 2-3 years I will be. So again, we are starting the AI, and from summer, AI summer has come again. So I'm very happy to promote that. So I wish all the best, and then AI will be successful in the near future.
Gautam?
Yeah. I think all I can say is let us temper our expectations from a technology, focus on the problems to be solved, and if we are solving the problems using whatever technologies are available and can be developed, and let us not put labels whether it is AI or BI or CI, it doesn't matter, because it's going to be a combination of things which solve the real problems, and that's more important. So AI might be a slogan, but if it becomes only a slogan, it loses all meaning. Let's talk about the problems being solved.
Thank you. Sriram?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Gautam here. In fact, one of the most inspirational books I read recently is the book called Digital Nation by N. Chandrasekaran, from Tata and Sons. And, one of the most important paragraphs in that book is about solving technology's people problem, which is, it is technology for technology's sake actually goes nowhere. Right? I think, it's extremely important that we solve real problems and put technology in context. And I hope we actually sort of break across industry, academia, government boundaries, because I think now, look at what we are going through with this COVID, right? These are just extremely difficult and challenging times. I think, I hope we can come together more and solve real problems and help people. So I'll stop there with that one. Yeah.
Thanks, Sriram. So from my point of view also, the academia his primary job is teaching and doing academic research, but increasingly there is realization that in the long term, in 5 years, you can count your papers and feel happy about it. But in a longer term, you want to be seen as solving problems that people care about, that has made a direct difference to some people through some products or solutions that others have taken up. So this realization has come, and academic institutions also will be willing to work more in the translation sphere, and I think the society should support them. I thank all the panelists for coming here, sparing your time and having a lively session. I really enjoyed it, and I hope it has been valuable to the viewers also. I hand over back to Dr. Rajendra Kumar.
Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you, Professor Narayanan and all the speakers in the panel for such an interesting and lively discussion. There are some pointers for policymakers like us. Some key thoughts that emerged from this panel on which I would like to just make a brief, very brief response. One issue came about data handling and how it is key to really furthering the AI research and how it can be translated to real world problems and how they can be effectively deployed. Just for information of all the participants here, data handling and data governance is a key area where MeitY is now currently involved. We are working very actively on the personal data protection framework and also on the non-personal data framework. As some of you might be aware, the PDP bill, the personal data protection bill, is already in the parliament for consideration. And I hope that it will become a law soon, and it will be the most contemporary data handling framework in the entire world. We also are the first country in the world to embark on a non-personal data governance framework, for which we brought out a paper for consultation just a couple of months before. And we opened that for feedback, and there's a lot of feedback from various stakeholders around the world. And that is now again being revised after taking all the suggestions into consideration. So that's a major issue for us. Also, one issue came about the real problem of coordinating among different ministry departments for AI research and deployment of these technologies in real use cases. That's an issue that definitely is there that we are trying to address through a common national program, as was mentioned by Dr. Murthy, what has been termed as the global national program on AI. And we have a strategy paper on AI as well, which is a guiding document for all the ministries as to how they can really deploy these technologies for their own domain issues and for improving service level, for example, and for ensuring that the different stakeholders in the economy can really work more efficiently for ensuring the overall vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat. So let me thank the panel again for this very interesting discussion. Moving on in our agenda, we have now a demo by Dr. Gautam Shroff, who is the chief scientist. It's not there?
No, there's no demo. We didn't have the right people for the demo. So
okay. So I think with this remarks, now we have come to the conclusion of this session. On behalf of MeitY and on behalf of Government of India, let me convey my sincere thanks to all the speakers, to the keynote speaker, Professor Vijayaraghavan, to all the panelists, the moderator, Professor P.J. Narayanan, and all the participants, all the members in the audience who have taken so much of their time to listen to different views from the speakers and those who have asked questions from the speakers. I can assure you that in MeitY, we are all committed to really ensuring that AI can be meaningfully deployed in real use cases, and it can be deployed to really ensure that we develop our own capabilities in these technologies and use it for social good in a responsible manner, which also the theme of this entire RAISE conference, that is responsible AI for social empowerment. So with these words, let me conclude the session here. And once again, thank you to everyone for this very lively and interactive session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
thank you,
Thank you, Dr. Rajendra.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Signing off.